Hey guys, it's Kat and I'm here with a rather random video. This was definitely not something that I was planning on, but I felt compelled to make this video. I felt compelled to have this conversation, so here we are. We are going to be responding to Blaire White's recent video about BDSM. If for whatever odd reason, this is the first video of mine that you are clicking on, my name is Kathryn, I am 30 years old, and I have been in the BDSM community for the past 4 years of my life. I've had a very complicated relationship with kink BDSM, especially as a trans woman. And one of the things I try to do on my YouTube channel is have conversations about BDSM in hopes that people can at least understand it a little bit more. So Blaire White is a transgender YouTuber who recently did a reaction video to a Barcroft documentary with the title, I identify as a dog. And in this video, a transgender man talks about his interest in pet play, and Blaire White has some interesting things to say about it. And in that video, she does misrepresent BDSM a little bit.
I open my phone and the first thing I see is my partner identifies as a dog. Right there on the front page for millions to see. The only thing I know about this before watching it is that this is a trans man who is also a trans dog. If you think I'm saying this to make fun of this person, that is not the case. This is literally how this person describes themselves. A trans man who also identifies as a dog.
My general issue with the way that Blaire White reacted to this video is the fact that at no point in this 9-minute Barcroft documentary does Tony, the trans guy who is into the pet play, say that he identifies as a dog. Those are not words that are uttered by him at all whatsoever.
My name is Tony and I'm a human pup.
I'm Andrew. I'm Tony's husband and trainer.
Pet play is any time that a person takes on the role of an animal and they emulate that animal, either through their behavior or their actions. Some people wear costumes.
I thought that this video by Blaire White was mostly harmless, making jokes about, you know, how weird BDSM is to her. And let's be honest, BDSM is weird to most people. And I personally am of the belief that BDSM should stay weird. I'm somebody who doesn't really agree with the mainstreaming of BDSM because for most of us, BDSM is about subverting taboo. It is about engaging in these things that we are not engaging in mainstream society. And so I do think that there's going to always be an issue, much like this, you know, the context of this video, when we try to make BDSM mainstream, right? But Blaire White is a vanilla, so it is totally reasonable for me that she doesn't understand this stuff. A vanilla is basically somebody who has no interest in BDSM or is not really into BDSM in that way. And I think that that describes most people. There's nothing wrong with being a vanilla. You know, some of my best friends are vanilla, and I don't think there's anything wrong with them. I don't really like to hang out with them very much, but I don't think that there's anything wrong with them. What I try to do on my YouTube channel is, you know, just give people perspective because I think that there's a lot of misunderstanding of BDSM and people make a lot of assumptions about people because they misunderstand BDSM. And really what this video is going to be about is sort of working against some of those things because Blaire White said a few things in here that are not true. Her audience seems to also agree with those untrue things. In fact, let's read the comments. Let's read some comments. Top comment, sexual fetishes are not legitimate identities. No one said that. Second comment, a lot of people need to learn that a fetish isn't a gender identity. Also didn't say that. So in this video, I wanted to cover a couple of things. Blaire's reaction, Barcroft documentaries in general, and also the stigma attached to being a transgender person who is into BDSM. But before we get into this video, I wanted to let you guys know that it's sponsored by Skillshare. Skillshare is an amazing online community of artists and creatives who come together to teach each other creative skills. Right now, I'm taking a class about productivity because, you know, being self-employed and doing all of this on my own, it is sometimes hard to be productive. And Thomas Frank has a really great class on Skillshare to take if you're interested in becoming more productive in your life. Right now, the first 1,000 of you guys who sign up with the link in my description box will get a free trial of Skillshare Premium. Anyway, let's get right into our regularly scheduled programming. So I guess we should define some terms here because I'm gonna assume that if you've clicked on this video, you probably are a vanilla. BDSM stands for bondage, discipline, sadism, masochism. There's a lot of other interpretations of the acronym, but for the sake of this conversation, let's go with that, right? And for the vast majority of people who do BDSM, it is about power exchange, right? Now, it's pretty common that the things that we do in BDSM don't necessarily reflect on the way that we identify in our daily life, right? For example, you can have your powerful CEO who, every Saturday goes to a dominatrix and she beats the shit out of him, right? That's somebody who in his daily life has no interest in being submissive, has no interest in bowing down to literally anyone, who enjoys being in power, but enjoys being in a situation where he allows somebody else to take the reins. For most of us, that's what BDSM is about. It is an escape, right? Pet play is one of the various types of power exchange that can be practiced within BDSM. And in this situation, the dominant is the trainer or the owner, and the submissive is the dog, right? Or the pet, right?
I got into pet play through Tony. Once we started dating, handler is a common role for human pups, and I was glad to do it.
They say when the student is ready, the master appears.
But like the way this is all presented is the actual issue for me. The identify as a dog thing. I identify as a man and also as a dog thing. Like, it makes a mockery of actual trans people, and y'all don't need me to even tell you that. Like, y'all know.
It is a little frustrating for me to listen to people very strongly argue against a point that was never made. If Tony came out and said that he identifies as a dog, I think that maybe that would be a debate and a conversation worth having, right? But he didn't say that. He never said that. He never insinuated that, never suggested it. But what he did say was that pet play was incredibly important to him and that it is part of his lifestyle.
Drop it. Drop it.
I enjoy running around. I enjoy tug of war. I enjoy fetch. Very typical dog activities. Within the larger club, we do fox hunts. We have dog shows. We have herding events. Anything a dog can do, a human can do.
When it comes to BDSM, there are some of us who just do it in the bedroom, and there are some of us, like myself, where BDSM is part of their lifestyle. We go to conventions, we collect toys like this, right? We are committed to sort of having community around BDSM because it's just that important to us, right? Now, having something as part of your lifestyle is distinctly different from identifying as this thing you escape into. A lot of what pet play is, honestly, is kind of like LARPing, right? It's kind of like having a LARP character, right? A lot of people who do pet play, they have this sort of character they retreat into, right? They have this sort of, dog persona that they embody when they are into this sort of play, right? And at the end of the day, it is escapism.
I consider myself out. I'm very open. That being said, I do compartmentalize my pet play because not everyone wants or needs to see that.
This is maybe an aspect of their personality, but it is not really their identity in the same way that Tony is a man who is transgender.
We don't make it sexual, but I have nothing against those who do. That's great. But more power to those who do.
I thought it was a fetish. Now I don't even know. I don't even know. At this point, just own it, okay? You're getting your rocks off. It is what it is. You're already up on TV barking and shit. Like, just own it at this point.
So in this documentary, Tony mentions that pet play is not sexual for him and his partner. And I think that that's something that might surprise a lot of vanillas because most vanillas look at BDSM and think that it's just a sex thing, right? Like they think it's literally just a sex thing, right? I think you'd be surprised to hear that the vast majority of dungeons in Los Angeles actually don't allow you to have sex, right? I have very rarely been to a BDSM event where there is also sex. That's a really, really common rule. And yeah, BDSM is incredibly erotic for a lot of people. It is incredibly kinky for a lot of people, but not all BDSM is just about having sex. So I'm not really gonna sit on here and tell you guys all about my BDSM interests and things, but I will say that I am a rope bunny and I do enjoy being tied up. My partner is in a very serious, dedicated rope tying group. If you're vaguely familiar with rope, and especially the LA area, you probably know what this group is, but they're very, very serious. They got retreats in the, you know, in the hills or whatever. And these are people who treat rope like an art form. These are people who study rope as an art form. It's like a hobby, like any other hobby, right? And there are so many people who create some absolutely beautiful work with rope, right? And is it sexy? Sure. Is it a little erotic? Sure. But for a lot of people, rope is not always sexual. And I think that's one thing that like a lot of vanillas probably don't get, is that there kind of is a difference between being erotic and being kinky and actually having sex. There's a lot of things that I enjoy and have enjoyed doing with a person who I don't have an interest in having sex with, but they know how to give me an experience that is very enjoyable to me, and they enjoy giving it to me as well. I think that BDSM is a little complicated for some people, and you're really not gonna get it out of a Barcroft video of all places, you know? So I wanted to really quickly talk to you guys about being a trans person who is also kinky and the weird stigma that often comes with that, because when you're trans, right, there are a lot of people who will look at you and will assume that you transitioned because of some weird fetish, right? And so as a trans person, you know, you are in a position where you often have to argue against that accusation. And I think that that becomes even more complicated when you actually are a trans person who does have kinks, right? This used to be me. This used to be me. And this particular version of myself was very, very, very invested in seeming like I was vanilla, seeming like I was normative in every single way. You know, oftentimes when you're trans, it's like, well, okay, I want to be trans, but I don't want to be like weird, right? And when I hear a lot of Blaire White's sort of condemnation of a lot of non-binary folk or, you know, transgender people who don't quite look like her, I hear a lot of that anxiety, right? That sort of idea that if you're gonna be trans, you need to be the most acceptable, most palatable version of your gender. You can't have an alternative style, you can't be a little weird, you can't be a little androgynous, you have to fully commit to this particular presentation, and that presentation needs to be conservative. I understand what it's like to fully fall back into this life of being seen as essentially a normal everyday woman, and be paranoid and afraid of how expressing yourself in any way other than that really narrow conservative way can make it seem suspicious it can make you seem suspicious, right? I want it to be seen as normal, right? And of course, what happened over time is I started recognizing that this was not a thing that I could deny of myself anymore. For a lot of us, we have this thing where we feel like we have to choose between being ourselves, who, you know, fully open, fully, you know, involved in our desires completely, and being somebody who, you know, survives. And here's the thing about this, you know, for a lot of trans people, not falling outside of the pattern, not falling outside of the narrative is survival, right? It is survival for a lot of people to, you know, not be weird, basically.
And it adds such an extra layer that the person is actually, you know, a trans man, supposedly. Like, why are you equating, like, why are you doing that? You're blurring lines that I would prefer not to be blurred.
And what I hear from Blaire in this video is her sort of trying to make this weird argument that, like, if you're a trans person who's kinky, that you are somehow making the trans community look bad, right?
I've been involved in pet play for my entire life. A lot of kids like to play pretend. They like to pretend to be an animal and they enjoy doing it. I just never grew out of that.
Tony likes being, you know, a dog and playing in that way and escaping in that way and being silly in that way. And he's done that since before he realized he was a trans guy. You know, like, this is just there's no correlation. And obviously the documentary and Blaire were trying to make that argument that there was some sort of correlation, but there just wasn't. Living your life according to the narrative that somebody else prescribed to you is a prison. And I think the vast majority of trans people know and understand this. I refuse to live within the narrow parameters that transphobes have set for me. I refuse to act like I am not into certain things because transphobes might think that it contradicts my gender. That's just something I refuse to bow down to. But when it comes to your narrative, sometimes we don't always get to control what other people say about us. So I wanted to talk a bit about misrepresenting the subject of these documentaries, because I think that this is something that happens a lot, both in the context of Barcroft and in the context of Blaire White, right? Now, Barcroft put the title, I identify as a dog. And like we've already discussed, that is never said by Tony at all whatsoever at any point in that documentary, right? Both Blaire White and Barcroft, they have this great knack for finding weird people on the internet to essentially highlight and ridicule. Blaire is a bit more obvious about it. Barcroft is very subtle about it, where they will edit things a certain way, they will frame things a certain way to make certain insinuations. I will never forget, I knew this couple. It was a trans guy and a trans girl. They were dating, they're together. I think they were married actually. And they did this documentary, I forget with which company, but when they were filming them in like these loving, intimate moments, the background music was like something out of a slasher film, like some, scary movie. And of course, as an audience, you're being taught by the audio cues and the visual cues that this is something that you are supposed to be repulsed by. When in truth, this was a beautiful story of two transgender people who found love with each other. If you've been a follower of mine for a really long time, you know that I've been approached by so many documentary series, including Barcroft. Barcroft wanted me to gather all of my partners together and do a video with them. I said no. And the big reason why I've never done a documentary or anything like that, even though maybe it could potentially help me out some way, or whatever, exposure or and all that, is because I know that they are not going to be invested in truthfully telling my narrative, which is why I've worked so hard to put out my own stuff talking about my life, because I know that it's going to be misrepresented by people who are truly only interested in showing their audience weird stuff, And that's why whenever you go to literally any Barcroft video about a trans person, about somebody who does gender atypical stuff in general, that the comments will almost overwhelmingly be misunderstandings, attacks, insults. These people are not watching with the desire to understand. They're watching with the desire to ridicule. You've got these companies like Barcroft who they love doing this thing where they will record people doing their kink. And most of us, because we're so used to being misunderstood, because we're so accustomed to people not getting BDSM, there are some people who are very seated in their positions within the BDSM community, and they go and talk to these camera crews. They go and talk to these companies, and they want to be recorded, and they want to come on, and they do it with good intention. They want for people to understand BDSM. But the problem is that the people that are interviewing them have no desire or interest of understanding BDSM. They're looking at it and saying, this is something weird that will get us clicks. And that's really where it begins and ends. So there's been a million videos made about this, so I don't really want to go too deep into this, but to really summarize what happened, Blaire White made a video about a transgender bodybuilder by the name of Janae Kroc, and her argument was that this bodybuilder wanted to compete against specifically cis women, right? And the narrative drawn there was that this was somebody who was designated male at birth, who wanted to come into women's, competition sports and just totally ruin the competition because she was designated male at birth and therefore had an unfair advantage, right? That is the argument, and we won't touch this debate, but well, I'm just giving you the facts, right? But in all reality, Janae has come out and said that she never wants to compete against women, and all of the titles that she's earned have been with her competing against men, whom she still continues to compete against to this day, despite being a transgender woman. And Blaire White and a lot of people like her do this a lot, where they will take something that in their view is outlandish, and they will frame it in a way that doesn't totally reflect what the person said, but is close enough to be believable by people who will never go back and watch the original video or watch the original documentary to know that what they said wasn't true. I can't even tell if they are ignorant or if they are relying on the ignorance of their following, because if you watch, Blaire White's argument that Tony identifies as a dog is totally contradicted if you actually watch the video, if you actually watch what he says about himself and about how he feels, it's contradicted immediately, right? So all of the argument for how silly it is for this person to identify as a dog and how it makes a mockery of the trans community, all of that falls apart completely just by you watching the original source.
Pet play is, first of all, great exercise. It's a lot of fun. CrossFit has nothing on pet play.
I would really encourage people, especially if you happen to watch this video and you are part of Blaire's audience, I would really encourage you guys to do your own research, form your own opinions. Don't just look at what she says and agree with it and go with it, because I think that the saddest thing about watching people just do that is seeing how people just don't want to be critical anymore. I think personally, I'm somebody who likes to form opinions after researching and after having a reason to feel a certain way. And again, if you think BDSM is weird, I totally think that is your right. I don't think that you need to like BDSM, be into BDSM, even be tolerant to BDSM. But if you're going at this guy with the belief that he identifies as a dog, you are attacking him for something he never said, did, or feels. So in closing, I think I would appreciate this video a lot more if Blaire was actually criticizing Barcroft in their framing, because Tony never says he identifies as a dog. That is a parallel that Barcroft made, and it is an insulting parallel. And I really want to encourage you guys to be critical and to think for yourself and to be an independent thinker and to not just agree with what anyone says, myself included. Do your research. Think for yourself. I think that is one of the most powerful things you can do. Anyway, I will talk to you guys later. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate those of you guys who stuck through this entire video. If you guys did, please be sure to put this emoji in the comment box below. The emoji is what all the cool kids do. And of course you're a cool kid. You're the hottest dog in town. I don't know where that came from. I don't even know if that's a saying, but I just made it up just now. Anyway, I will talk to you guys next time. Bye.